This week on Obsessed with Wine.
Because he's in real estate, he always has his eye open and just on that same website clicks over to the real estate section. And that's when the property that we're at now, the property that is now the Copia estate, presented itself.
Hello, wine enthusiasts. My name is Wesley Cable. Welcome to another episode of Obsessed with Wine. In some of the most famous wine regions in the world, great family wineries are purchased by giant corporations as a way of diversifying their holdings and owning a piece of the wine business. That's not always a bad thing, but it does take away from the family atmosphere sometimes that some wine enthusiasts really enjoy. Some people, like my mother-in-law, like to be able to visit their favorite family winery, experience the great wines, and have the opportunity to speak to the owner or winemaker, who are usually the ones also hosting their guests. It's not often in this environment that you get to meet a family who recently followed their dream of buying land, growing grapes, and starting their own label. This is exactly what Varinder and Anita Sahi have done. They recently turned their love of wine and hospitality into the fabulous Copia Vineyards and Winery in Paso Robles, California. In this episode, I sit down with Mr. and Mrs. Sahi, and we talk about their journey from wine enthusiasts to vintners, the process of finding the right land to purchase to grow their grapes, and some exciting new things coming to Copia Vineyards and Winery in the near future. Pour yourself a glass of your favorite wine. It's time for Obsessed with Wine. Well, anyone who loves wine and winemaking like I do has probably dreamed of growing grapes and starting their own winery. I think more of us just like the idea of owning the winery and not necessarily going through what it takes to start and run a good winery. Tonight's guests are doing just that in Paso Robles, California. I want to welcome Varinder and Anita Sahi, owners and winemakers for Copia Vineyards and Winery in Paso Robles, California. How are you two doing tonight?
We're
doing great.
Excellent. Well, I have to say, I'm a little intimidated. This is the first time I've actually had two people to interview at one time. So it's a little intimidating, but I promise I'll do my best.
Will it help you if we tell you that we function as a hive mind?
That's right.
No, thank you. But no, that's okay. I'll be all right. Let's start at the beginning for you two. So I looked through the website. It mentions in there a little bit of history about you two, that you guys had met, I guess, just in 2015. So you haven't known each other that long. Is that right?
That's true. That's correct.
Very true.
Okay. So how did that come about? How did you guys meet, and how did this all begin?
Well, I think the story begins with us not coming from wine culture. I grew up, and I was born and grew up in northwest of India, a state called Punjab. And we grew up drinking beer and whiskeys, and wine was so foreign to us. Then I immigrated to Canada, and I did my master's there. And while I was in corporate world, that's where I was introduced to wine. And I was introduced to very, very good wines right from the beginning. And I fell in love with the wines. And every time I had an opportunity or chance, I would always visit different wine regions. And I happened to have San Francisco as one of my territories, and I went to Napa, Sonoma every chance I had. So it was an acquired taste, but the passion for it grew very, very early in my life. So I would say mid-20s. And I told myself, if I ever could I'll go back to school. I want to know more about it. And around 2012, I was in the position where I could go back to UC Davis, learn about winemaking. And while I was doing that, I met Anita. And we met 2015 in Chicago. And our first date was 12 hours long, and it was all about the wine. And I'm going to let Anita elaborate that.
Yeah. So at the time in 2015, I was back in my hometown of Chicago, Illinois, and I had just been spending the last 14 years actually in the hospitality industry. So I've done everything when it comes to the world of restaurants. I started in a pastry kitchen at a tiny independent restaurant in Chicago, and then moved all the way through the front of the house and into marketing and operations. And I landed myself at some very amazing restaurants in New York City, in fact. So I spent about 8 years in New York City working for Michelin level restaurants. And these places had wine cellars, 20,000 bottles that were just, I was like a kid in a candy store, to
I
be
bet.
honest. Had so much exposure to fine wine that I had never had before. And that's kind of what started and fostered my wine education. So full circle, we're in 2015 and Varinder has gone through his wine studies, and I separately have come from the hospitality side and become a huge wine lover. And we meet for the first time, and it's just maybe one step removed from a blind date. We had not a whole lot of knowledge about each other. And we got together at this beautiful brunch restaurant in Chicago on the river called The Kitchen, and thought that, we thought we were going to pull one over on each other and not admit that we occasionally day drink. So we ordered just coffee and
Oh,
quiche
wow.
and took it slow. Varinder was a little bit nervous, I believe, because there was a little bit of chattiness, we could say that. And he left the table, and I just felt like, you know what, the game is over. Let's just bring wine. We need wine. This date is going to need wine if we're going to get through.
Wine saved our first date.
Oh, good. So let me ask you this, Varinder, before we go on, just to mention. So, what did you do before you got educated in wine? What did you do before?
I was trained as an engineer, and I was a professional engineer. On top of that, I did masters in business, MBA.
Uh-huh.
So I worked mostly engineering, marketing, and around 2003, I started my real estate business. So that's what I still do on the side. That's what
Uh-huh.
really pays the bills
Yeah.
for this venture.
So, and you mentioned something earlier that I thought was fascinating, and I bet a lot of people don't realize that is in India, there isn't wine, like it's not a big thing over in India, you're saying. People don't drink it over there.
No, when I was growing up in 90s, it was, never heard about it. But now it has become, last 30 years, there is some wine culture, but it's such a big country, such a huge population. The amount of wine they are producing is insignificant for that whole country. In fact, one of the gentlemen who really started that industry studied in Stanford, and he fell in love because, going to Napa, and he went back home, started this whole industry back, and it's doing great now. But when I was growing up, 80s, there was nothing, and now we go back, and there is some sort of wine culture, but it's still very rudimentary. It's not, the quality is not there yet.
And when we were growing up, we were just not exposed to it at all because our parents were not exposed to it. It doesn't matter if you were, in India or here, if you were of
Sure.
Indian heritage, it just wasn't a beverage that you had in your house.
Yeah, Anita was born and grew up here in Chicago, so she had exposure to wine in 20s.
Yeah, my story's a lot like yours in the sense that neither of my parents ever drank any wine, so I never had any around the house, and it's just something that I gravitated to later in life. So I know what you're saying there. So then you guys meet. You guys talk a little bit on the website about Booker wines. Now, is this Booker in Paso Robles?
Yes.
So in there it says that those wines were inspirational to you two, and so I was going to ask you, what was inspirational about Booker wines? What is it that made them so special to you?
Part of the story is that, going through UC Davis, they had this technical trip where they brought us, I think, approximately 20 people from different parts of the country to visit Paso Robles as a wine region where you get to meet different winemakers. It was, I think, 9 different wineries, and I asked Anita to come and join me. She did. And during that trip, before that trip, we knew Paso Robles just because of, Justin or J-Lo or a little bit of Dow maybe, and some cult wines like Saxon. But we didn't really know much about the wine region other than, it's part of the central coast. When we were going through that trip, we went to like small scale wineries at that time, like Clos Salin. We went to Herman Story, Urban Winery. Then we went to bigger winery, J-Lo. We were exposed to Niner, Epic, and Booker, and many more. Overall, the Syrah was sort of king for us, and I wasn't used to drink Syrah. I was more into Napa Cabs, and I just felt, man, these wines have, everything that one is looking for. And in particular, Booker's fracture was something that was like really outstanding on all different levels.
Not only did the wine definitely is what drew us to Booker, and particularly Eric's Syrahs were very inspirational. It just kind of was a varietal for us that became very important from that moment on. It was something that we thought had just a lot of all the things that we like. But we were also quite taken by Booker's operation and how candid Eric Jensen was with us as a group of people that, had different levels of exposure to Paso at that point in time. And he was just very open and very honest and very colorful. For anybody that knows Eric, that's a nice way of describing it.
Yes.
And we really appreciated that. He just really tells it like it is.
So we fell in so much in love with Paso that we came back and became Booker's intern. And I think we had a badge of being the oldest intern.
Wow. So you guys actually interned, both of you, at the winery at Booker?
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah.
And what did you do? Did you actually go through a harvest, or what did you guys do?
Everything that an intern does in a harvest, from taking samples, sanitizing, to cleaning, to
Processing,
inoculation, to everything.
Yeah.
So how was that experience? I've done a few of those myself, and I loved it. I thought it was so great. Like, some people can't handle it because it is a lot of work, and I don't think people realize how much work it really is and how much, how hard it is.
It's funny you say that, because that's exactly the reason why we did it, to see if we had the stuff that it would take. And yes, of course, we knew that there was going to be a lot of hard work involved. Of course, we didn't know exactly in what form that hard work would come in. And it's well beyond what you can imagine. You can say hard work and it still won't encompass just how hard it really is, day in and day out, for, the better part of 2.5, 3 months. There is no break when it's the height of harvest. But I think our previous lives really did prepare us well for hard work. We have been through, different industries where hard work is part and parcel of what we do.
Exactly. I always think that the previous life really prepared us for winemaking, because in winemaking, it's not just one skill. You need to be plumber, you need to be everything. You need to be handyman and do everything yourself. And then when it comes to the harvest, it is one long season.
So when you guys got to harvest and you started doing it and you were starting to get, this is what it really is all about, were you guys just in love with it at that point? I just remember, for me, it was like, this is great. I absolutely love doing this. Is that kind of how it was for you?
It is. In fact, it still is. I always talk about it. You have a 16-hour day. You're so tired. You come home, you just pass out. And then next morning you are ready again. And somehow that passion makes you like, I can't wait for the next day. So it is always you get that high of the harvest, where you're getting new fruit every day. You want to see what is happening to my ferment. So it is very addictive, I would say.
I would agree. It's really exhilarating, and it's the time we wait for all year. It's the time we prepare for all year.
Yeah.
So there has to be something you guys didn't like doing, though. Is there anything that you didn't like about harvest? There's got to be something.
Oh, yeah. I can speak for Varinder. I can tell you, he always found a way to get out of cleaning tanks. He used like every excuse in the book. He's like, oh, I can't fit through the manhole.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so big shouldered,
Yeah. No, that was I always tell, we still do it. But some of the smaller tanks, 550s, and, getting in without it's a little bit difficult. But
okay. All right. Other big dudes can do it, Varinder.
I still do it. It's not that.
Well, and for me, I think the part that I didn't dislike anything, because if you think about it, we were like sponges, and we were really soaking it up, especially me, because Varinder already had a background in science, and here he was, already as part of the UC Davis viticulture and enology program. He was at least well versed with a lot of the things we were working on. I was brand new. And I have a little bit of a background in a little bit of everything, but as far as science goes, not so much. And I was exhilarated to learn.
But I think, no matter how much you study in the books or academically, unless you do it, you will never get it. It's just, there's something about really doing everything with your own hands. And we were so fortunate in 2016, Booker was growing and they had a very lean team. So we got to do almost everything, and that was really...
Oh, yes. Putting up shade cloth at 3:15 p.m. in the middle of July. Yeah. I disliked that.
99 degrees.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Well, like you were just saying, I think it's interesting when you work for a smaller place, and when I mean smaller, I just mean a smaller crew. You actually get to do more than if you join a big winery and maybe you're on the harvest team, but they stick you on one thing and you do the same thing the whole harvest. Like, you really don't get the same experience. So yeah, I definitely see how beneficial it is to work at a smaller place like you guys are talking about. All right, so you guys did your harvest. So when did you decide that we want to do this? We want to, start our winery and grow grapes and make wine. When did this actually start happening?
Prior to that harvest, we were already making a little bit of wine in Lodi. I had a small vineyard with my brother that we planted in Lodi. And we never had an intent to really go commercial. It was just making a barrel at a time for family and friends. When we came here, of course, we got influenced by Eric Jensen and Booker, a lot of other winemakers. And also we could see that we could do this. And after that harvest, we were convinced that if we ever want to do anything commercial, this is the place to do it. The Paso Robles and on the west side. And our search began right after the harvest, where we wanted to find something, a piece of our own property where we can, and we didn't want to do anything that was already existing. So we wanted to create our own. And finally, we found this place in end of 2017.
It's a little bit of a Cliff's Notes version, but I can tell you that it was a very slow and painstaking process to find the right place. And there were times, at the end of 2016 and at the beginning and middle of 2017 that we were just like, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe we'll buy grapes, or maybe it's just not meant to be. We hold a lot of value in things that come to us. It feels like a lot of these things have come to us because we were ready to receive them. So we found this property, but the way we found it was very interesting. We had all but given up. We were just like, okay, well, if the right place comes, great. But here we are, still making this, what I like to call practice wine in Lodi. And Varinder was online looking for neutral white wine barrels, things that are, of mystique and don't really exist. And he found some, and because he's in real estate, he always has his eye open, and just on that same website clicks over to the real estate section. And that's when the property that we're at now, the property that is now the Copia estate, presented itself. And it took us just one day to come see it and make an offer.
So I see on the website, it says you guys bought 50 acres in the Willow Creek district. Is that right? That's what the property you're talking about?
That's right. So we are on Kyler Canyon. As part of Willow Creek, we were able to get, the first parcel was 25 acres that has two homes. One we live in, and one is the guest house that we VRBO. And there was the adjacent property that was another 25 acre, and we just prayed, and we very fortunately that gentleman let us buy that property, and he didn't even know what was asking price. I didn't know what to offer, and he said, "Let's get the appraisal done, and whatever it comes, we'll settle for that." So that made it really viable. So we have 50 acres on Kyler Canyon. Out of that, 20 acres are planted now. Most of the planting was done in 19. We prepped the property in 2018, and 20 acres are planted. And there is around 5 acres that we left where our eventual winery and tasting will be.
So I was going to ask you about that too. So when you're looking at properties, like, is the property you bought, was there any grapes planted on it, or was it just land at that time?
No, there were 2.25 acres were planted, In fact, this property was owned by a gentleman, Michael Dewitt, and he is a best friends with Stefan Aseo from LaVenture. And in fact, Stefan helped him develop that 2.25 acre, and he was making a little bit of wine. When we bought it and we did more research, realized that Michael was irrigating in a way that he would irrigate his lawn, and most of the vineyard was J-rooted. So they were just very surface roots. So we had to take it out and then replant everything.
So when you guys buy your property, did you already know what you wanted to grow, or did you do research, or how did you figure out what you wanted to grow on the land?
We grow what really grows well on the west side, which is mostly Rhone varieties. But we also love Cab, so we also planted. So I would say around 60% of our program is Rhone varieties, which is Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. But we also wanted to do something on the Bordeaux side. So we have around 4 acres of Cabernet and 1 acre of Petit Verdot. And this year we had another 0.6 acre that was sitting there. We didn't know what we're going to do with that. But last year I made some Tempranillo, and now we're going to plant Tempranillo now.
So once you decide what you're going to plant, how long does it take to get it all planted and ready to go? And then how long does it take before you can actually make wine out of it?
So we, as I said, 18 was for us we had to rip the property, get all the infrastructure in there. We planted pretty dense, it's 7x3, most of the vineyard, other than 2 blocks, which are meter by meter. So it took all 18 prepping it. 20 we planted I think by June, everything was planted. Third leaf was last year. So last year was our first estate fruit. So from the point we bought, 4 years down the road, and this year we are very excited because this year we're going to have decent amount of fruit. Last year we had only approximately 25% of the fruit that we will eventually have.
So now you guys are obviously buying fruit now to make your wines, but eventually will you have enough to produce all your wines, or will you still have to buy some?
We will have enough to produce our own wines, but last 4 years been very interesting because we not only bought and made wine from Paso Robles, Willow Creek, and Adelaida districts, but we also experimented and bought a lot of cool climate Syrahs. And, we went all the way to Lampoc. We bought some Santa Rita Hills, mainly Peakran, John Sebastiano, then Ballard Canyon, Kimsey Vineyard, and then Santa Maria, Bien Nacido, then in Edna Valley, Jesperson, Slide Hill. And we realized after all this, time that we love our estate fruit and we will probably focus on that, but we always going to buy some cool climate Syrah. So we have a long-term contract with Bien Nacido. That will be definitely our one vineyard that we would like to keep in our portfolio, as well as we buy Chardonnay from Bien Nacido that we will continue to buy.
Now, so you guys are making wine out of grapes that you purchase. So you're saying this year you'll be able to actually make a decent amount of wine out of some fruit off your own property? That's got to be pretty exciting, right?
It is very exciting. Last year we had our estate fruit probably did like 30% of our total grapes. This year I think we're going to have around 80% of our own fruit.
That's exciting. So as far as making the wine, Varinder, do you do all of that, or do you have an assistant, or are you the one who has to do all that?
In the winery, we have no other employees other than me, myself, and Anita. And we want to keep that way because we are not that big. We do only around 40 tons of fruit. So we do everything ourselves. We make wine at Denner. We have a little rented space in the back of that winery. And I would say we are the last winemakers at that facility who are making their own wine. But that facility, the Epic started there, Law started there, a lot of, 6 Mile Bridge started there. So a lot of different wineries started there. It's an amazing facility, amazing people from starting all the way from the top, Ron Danner to, Anthony John being a world-class winemaker. It's fun. It's a really, really fun being at that facility.
Yeah, we're lucky to have our little compact winery within their larger winery, and so fortunate that we can have our own space to make the wine the way that we want to make it. We even have a little space share in their shared lab. We have our own lab where we do all of our own testing. So it's been a wonderful and fostering place for us as younger. I say younger winemakers. I mean, we're newer.
So eventually, though, you said eventually, as things grow, you have property in order to actually have your own winery and do everything and tasting room and everything right there on your property, which will be really nice.
That is true. It took us 3.5 years to get our minor use permit. And I was a little impatient with that, but I think now it's a blessing in disguise while we are building up we started with 250 cases, we're slowly growing. We are around 1,500 cases now. So it's going to, last year we got the minor use permit. This year we will have our construction permits, and we hope to break ground by end of this year.
So I want to ask you, because this is something that, I've thought of a lot, and I said this earlier, as a lot of people who love wine and winemaking think, gosh, it'd be so great to have my own winery and do all that stuff. So you guys named it Copia Vineyards and Winery. So where did the name come from, and what does the name mean?
Well, just like the property, the name came to us too. It was the existing brand from the DeWitts, Michael and Andrea, who owned this plot of land before us. And it means abundance. It's a Latin root word. So the words that you might be familiar with, cornucopia or copious. So it has a lot to do with harvest, obviously. We didn't know, whether that was something that we were going to do. In fact, we didn't even know that the name or the brand was available until just towards the end before closing on the property, when Michael said, "Hey guys, I think you guys are going to do things in such a fun way that what do you think about carrying on the legacy of Copia?" And we didn't really give it much thought. We were probably just going to call it Sahi Family Vineyards. We said, well, let's try the wine. Let's meet the winemaker and the owner in his element and see what it's like. The wine was excellent, and the winemaker is such a character that there's a lot of heart and there's a lot of goodwill behind this brand. And we felt actually honored to be able to carry it on. And we've taken, the opportunity over the last few years to really make Copia our own. And Varinder always tells a story of how when we first came to this property, that we had this feeling of fullness, just an overwhelming feeling of being in the right place, that feeling of plentiful and of feeling grateful. That was something that resonated with us. So the name came to us and it stuck, and we're very, very happy to have it.
Yeah, that's a great story. I think that's awesome. That's one of the reasons I do this show, is because I love hearing stories like that. All right, so let's talk about the wines now. So I've got some notes here. I want to ask you about some wines specifically. So as far as white wines, you guys make something you just call white, 2020 white. It's a blend of Chardonnay, Roussanne, and Viognier. And I like the website, like I said earlier, because there's food pairings on there, and it says this is what would go well with that wine. So tell me a little bit about white and how it's made.
First of all, the reason we call it white is because we can change that blend every year.
Exactly. So we do make two whites. One is it's just white. It's a blend of, it could be mostly Rhone blend, or this year it ended up it needed some Chardonnay.
It's kind of a playground for us to blend the varietals that we want to blend each year. Although, as Varinder said, we will have another white wine coming up in the next release. So Chardonnay, Roussanne, and Viognier. The blend to me feels so balanced because we've got this sort of saline acidity from Chardonnay that's being grown just 9 miles from the Pacific Ocean. And it's very much a maritime climate. That fruit is from John Sebastiano Vineyard. And then it's followed by 35% Roussanne. So 45 Chardonnay, 35 Roussanne, and 20% Viognier. That Roussanne and Viognier both come from the Willow Creek district. The Roussanne from Caliza Vineyard and Viognier from Denner Vineyard. Roussan gives it a more unctuous, kind of a fuller mouth feel, while Viognier is giving all of this beautiful aromatics for days.
And in full disclosure, we wanted to make two wines. So and we were going to make a Chardonnay, and we were going to make a Roussan and Viognier blend. And they were both good, but one of the most fun thing winemaking is blending. Paso is known for blends. And we realized, I'm just playing around and doing some blends. And I always liked when Chardonnay went into the Roussan and Viognier blend, and it just lifted it up and gave it freshness. And so we loved that. So we scratched our idea of doing just two whites, and we said, we're just going to do one, and because that's what we like.
Yeah, the sum of the parts was greater than any individual, and that's when that's what the blend is.
And that happens a lot of times when you got a couple of wines that are, maybe you intended to make separately, but then when you add them together, they just end up being more special. So that's interesting. So let's go to the next wine here. So you guys make a rosé, and it's a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre, I guess mostly Grenache rosé, and it says sold out. So you guys that must be a popular wine.
It is.
It is.
It is. It's in the 2020 vintage. It was predominantly Grenache driven. It's Saunier style. We have something that has a little bit more body than maybe a direct press rosé would have. It's still dry in style, but such a food-friendly wine. If you were talking about food pairing earlier, this wine really, really does sing with a lot of these like rich poultry dishes. In fact, this is kind of the wine that you want to bring to Thanksgiving to please everybody at the table. So you have a lot of strawberry notes on the nose, just a very fun and light expression of all of these Rhône varietals, but they have enough structure, being a Saunier wine, that they can pair very well with food as well.
Mm-hmm. So what we do with the rosé is to be Saunier, the bleed off of our red wine making, and we do multiple lots. At the end of the harvest, we decide which lot's gonna make into the rosé. The rest of that, those ferments go to Calvise, and they become
delicious spirits.
So the next wine here is the 2019 The Story. I like the fact that the names of the wines, they're unique, and it's almost like you guys know what they're about, but by looking at the title, I wouldn't know. So where do the names come from, and how do you come up with those?
All these names have some sort of story, no pun intended.
Pun intended.
And to us, our story is a Grenache dominant wine. We try to make 100% Grenache if possible. And this year there is a little bit of Syrah in there, approximately 8%. So if you look at the Southern Rhône, that is the region we are, sort of paralleling to here in Paso Robles, west side. And the story really begins with Grenache. 60% of Southern Rhône is planted with Grenache, and Grenache is one of the reds that passes through all of our core wines. So, of course, the Grenache, our story begins with Grenache, and our red story begins with Grenache. So that's where the name story comes from.
Interesting. And it's a common theme in a lot of the wines that you make, especially the reds, obviously, that you have 20 months pretty much aging in oak on all of the wines. How did you decide on that?
We try to make wines that we love to drink. So, of course, the percentage of oak varies. Story will have approximately 40%. It is also aged in a bigger vessels. It's aged in 500-liter puncheons as compared to the cure and the source, which is more into the barrels. So we try to match the varietal with amount of oak that we think that that varietal can take.
And that's actually a very good point when Varinder mentions the larger format barrels versus your 59-gallon barrels, the standard barrels. 20 months in oak is kind of a sweet spot for us. We have done 18 months occasionally, and some they'll even go longer to 22 months. But just going to tell you the honest truth. There's one bottling day for us. So everything is getting bottled that day. So the way we can mitigate it is for each of the wines to have their own character is the amount of new French oak and the toast on that oak and the format of that oak. So even though they're all 20 months, they're all very different.
So the other wine here is the Source. So this is a 2019 Source. It's a mostly Syrah, but it's got some Grenache in there. So tell me about this particular wine. It looks like a lot of these wines, actually, the ratings have been really, really good. So it's got to make you guys feel pretty good. So tell me about the Source.
So Source is our flagship wine. This is a Syrah blend, basically predominantly Syrah. Sometimes we get a little bit of, and this year we have a little bit of Grenache, and it's a blend of both cool climate as well as Willow Creek, warm climate, Paso Robles Syrah. So it's a best of both worlds. We source fruit from Danner, Alta Crina, Live Oak Ranch, and then from the south, as I was talking before, John Sebastiano, Slide Hill, BNC. So it's a blend of both warm climate as well as cool climate Syrah.
Yeah, 2019. Well, as you know, we mentioned, the big inspiration for coming to Paso were the phenomenal Syrahs that we tried here upon our first visit. So this became a special varietal, and it kind of became the muse behind a lot of the wines and the source. Namely, we call it that because it is the source of our inspiration for coming to Paso. 2019 is a very unique year when it comes to Syrah at Copia. We took it upon ourselves, again, with just Varinder and myself in the winery, to source 8 different distinct sites of Syrah that year. And what I found interesting about what Varinder wanted to do that year was to keep all of the vinification pretty much the same across the board. So everything was destemmed. The oak program was similar on all of the lots. All of the winemaking was the same. So what he was trying to do and what he did do was to really see how each of these sites expressed themselves.
So my background being engineering, I loved in my previous life, did a lot of design of experiments where you keep all the variables same and then see what the end result is. So that's exactly what Anita is describing. We kept all the variables in the process same except source of the varietal or source of the grapes. It was a study to understand how different microclimates, how different AVAs, how different vineyard and the farming practices will change this varietal. And it's a phenomenal to see how.
We always hear consumers and winemakers alike talk about sight and how important sight is, but until you really experience it from its infancy on through aging, you really don't have the full picture. So this was an amazing experiment.
Exactly. We are still students of Syrah, and this was totally full on. The whole vintage of focus was to understand this varietal better. And the good thing is, out of that huge experiment, we found 3 different vineyard designate 100% Syrahs that very small quantity, of course, 3 barrels each. We were able to do single vineyard bottlings. It was John Sebastiano, Biancino, and Slide Hill. And we made it very small quantity just for our club members, and very happy how those wines are coming along.
Yeah, that Syrah is called the Pursuit.
Tell me about that. So the Pursuit is you can only buy them if you're a club member, and you can only buy them as a group. Is that how it is?
Yes,
that's right. It's a set of three bottles, and it's very limited quantity. As I said, 3 barrels. At the end of the day, they are like 70 cases each, and we want to keep it. We are not able to make every year. We tried 72, but 70 we decided it's better to sacrifice the single vineyard designates and make our core wines, which is Story, Source, and Cure, as good as they could be. So yeah, that's why we just kept it very small quantity, just for the people who've been believing in us and joining our small Copia club. It's our gift to them.
And we really do encourage having it as a set, because it kind of recreates that experiment that we did ourselves in 19, and that is to really have an exploration of sight through one varietal. And in certain cases, for example, with the Slide Hill and the Bien Nacido, the clone of the Syrah is the same as well. So that's like really diving deep and seeing how different each of the sites are. It's just, it's a little bit of magic, but there's a lot of history in some of these vineyards. Bien Nacido, I think it's 1973, right? Is the original planting of that vineyard. It's a crazy place, and we're so fortunate to have the ability to make the Syrah from there.
So if I just walked in off the street and wanted to buy a set of that Pursuit, is that possible or not?
At this moment in time, it is not.
Okay.
No, but Wesley, you will go through our different wines, and you will probably join the club, and then it's possible.
Oh, then it is. Okay. So if I was a club member, I could buy it.
Yes,
exactly. And
it's still available, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not gone.
Yeah, there's still a small quantity available. We released it for just a week's time. A lot of it sold. And then I'm glad that we do still have a small amount for any new club members that are joining us that didn't get a chance to be a part of that original release. And again, we really, really hope, in future years that we'll continue to find these special projects and add them to the Pursuit label.
So I want to talk a minute about ratings, wine ratings, okay? Because you guys are in a unique position. A lot of the people that I talk to are either the owner or they're the winemaker. And it seems like their viewpoint is a little bit different as it comes to wine ratings. So like I said earlier, the ratings you guys have here, I mean, lots in the 90s, lots mid 90s scores. So how do you feel about the ratings? How important is that to you? And maybe it's more important because you guys are a newer winery.
I think you said it absolutely. It's as a newer winery, it's something to validate. I don't buy wine. I don't encourage people to buy wine just because of scores. But it's just something to validate our own conviction that we are just to double check, I would say.
Yeah, I am coming from the restaurant world. I mean, dealing with critics has been a long time, part of my life, my professional life, and it's very subjective. It is very, very subjective. And with that said, there are certain reviewers and writers that we really do actually kind of agree with their palates. And I do look to some of them actually to let me know what the next release of such and such will be. I kind of respect what they're saying because I really I agree with them. And then there are others yet that, I may not understand their scoring as much or where they're coming from, but gosh, it is so subjective. The day they're tasting on what happened with that bottle, how did that bottle get to them? Where are they tasting it? There's a lot of factors. I don't think you'll hear that on their end. To them, it's very objective.
At the end of the day, I think the consumers should respect their own palate and try.
Yes.
And if they like it, then that is the best wine for them, right? But for us, the scores are it's a necessary evil that we have to sort of play the game right now. But we try to make the best wine we can possibly make that we will love to drink. But I would encourage consumers to just taste new or different wines and see what you like, rather than just following somebody's scores.
I think that's a pretty common answer that I get from a lot of people, a lot of winemakers. They say the same thing, don't fall in love with the scores, drink the wines that you like to drink, whatever you like. You might like this wine, you might think it's 100-point wine and somebody might give it something else. But if you like it, just drink it. You drink what you like.
Absolutely.
But I think the scores are interesting because there are people out there who get interested in wine simply because somebody gave it, say, 95 points. Whether they're going to think it's a 95-point wine or not, they may not, but that actually draws them into wanting to at least try it and say, well, somebody thought this thing was pretty darn good.
Yes, you are absolutely right. And there's a large, it's not a few people, there's a large population of people that whether they go to a restaurant because it has a Michelin star, or whether they pick a wine because it has 95, 96 and above. It's a measure of quality, right? We have to be honest that not everybody can get those scores. There's just sort of a base level of quality that you have to match to even be in that ballpark. So I think, yes, people do use it as a tool to kind of, come in through the door. And that's when the interesting part is for us, when they have walked through the door, then we get to introduce them to this entire world that maybe they didn't know about. And I'm happy for it. If that 90, if that 96 score brought them to my door, I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would. And for me, and I don't make wine, but if I was a winemaker, if somebody said it was a 95-point wine, I don't care who it was, I'd feel pretty good about that. Like it would give me a little bit of satisfaction knowing that somebody appreciates what I'm doing, whatever it is.
That's true too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so true. We don't make wine for reviewers, but when somebody gives you decent scores, yeah, it makes you feel better.
So let's move on a little bit to, I want to talk about just tasting at your facility. So you guys are downtown Paso Robles. What I thought was interesting is you guys are open Thursday through Monday. So you guys are off on Tuesday and Wednesday. Is that by design for some reason, or does that just work best for you guys?
Typically, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the slower days, and we were using them as days to really work on other things, and staffing also is kind of an issue. But it's funny you mentioned this because starting in another week, we are actually going to be 7 days.
Starting April 20th, we're going to be 7 days. We are open from 11 to 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock being the last tasting. And on Friday and Saturday, we are open till 8 o'clock. And after 5, it is by the glass or by the bottle service. We do have a tasting room and also have a small sort of lounge at the back end of the tasting room. So where most of the industry hangs out, we hang out, and some of our club members hang out on Friday, Saturday.
So if we came out there on a Friday or Saturday, we could actually sit down with you guys and have some wine and talk about it and all that stuff. That you guys are there to do that with everybody.
Yeah. Oftentimes we are.
Exactly.
Other than during harvest.
Right.
Yeah, if we are not busy in the winery, we love to hang out with folks, And we also, starting in a couple of weeks, we're going to start doing some vineyard tours and some vineyard picnic lunch. Those kind of things we'll love to, again, have more and more face time with the club members and our friends.
But this is the fun time for us, Wesley. We get to meet the people that are drinking the product that we work so hard on, and it's really, really important. Honestly, it's as important as making the wine to us.
And for a lot of consumers, the opportunity to sit down with the people that are making the wine or who are involved in the business, that's a big perk for a lot of people. They like that. Where at a big winery, that's never going to happen. That's got to be a positive for you guys for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I would love it.
These first few, we've essentially started our club in 2019, right? So, these first couple of years have been really fun for us because we started with this core group of club members, the early adopters, the believers, the true believers when we're, in the middle of a tiny room pouring on basically 2 barrels and a plank of wood. And those people we really appreciate. They came to us at a time when, who knew what we were going to be working on or who will be at one point in time. And they believed in Copia, they believed in the dream, and they believed in us. And it is really, really important. And we will never forget it. And kind of just enjoy hanging out with the people in the tasting room.
Yeah. And we encourage people to, reach out to us, and we'll love to show them the vineyard, but, where how it is coming along. And it's a pretty cool site.
Well, let me ask you too, you guys, on the website, it mentions a virtual tasting experience, which is kind of a new thing just in the wine world, just being able to do that online and be able to do that. So tell me about that. Is that something you guys are doing, and how is that put together? Do you just send them some wine, or how does that work?
Well, we actually are doing quite a few of these this month, but it's a very customized experience. So we don't at the moment have these tasting kits, that we've seen out there with the smaller sample bottles. We actually send full-size bottles. Typically, it's around 2 to 3 bottles, and people either, they'll open up one or both, and they can do it with a group of friends. We've done it for anywhere from, as intimate as 10 people on upwards to 100 people.
Mhm.
So there's different, there's club members who want to have, a gathering with friends, or there's, more of a work environment, corporate group that wants to do it as a team building thing. We spend about 45 minutes to an hour after we've arranged shipping the bottles directly to you. We set a date, we hop on Zoom and spend a lot of time just kind of chatting back and forth. We share not only information on Copia, but a little bit of information on the Paso Robles ABA and the winemaking process. So it's as in depth as our guests want it to be, and it also turns into a happy hour.
Yeah, it is mostly, we want to make it more interactive where people can ask anything they have on their mind about winemaking, about Paso Robles, about our own story. And it's fun. We have done Google, we have done Harvard.
One time we had a group of 30 people gathered at a restaurant that was carrying our wine, and they had come into a private room, and I guess we were projected onto some large TV, and they were all there while we were presenting and shouting out questions, and that was unique. That was very unique. So it's something, it's a holdover from pandemic times that I don't think we're doing it as often as we did in that year, but it's people still enjoy it. Now they've learned, just like people have learned that working remotely is not all that bad. They've learned, hey, this is a fun way to get together in an instant, even if you're in different locales.
And we're going to do one with our club members before harvest about the pursuit, where different club members will be able to open whatever bottle of pursuit they want to open, and we will open all three and just do a virtual tasting together.
Yeah, that sounds like so much fun, those virtual tastings. So do you guys actually do them? Are you guys the ones we see on the video? You have time for that with all the other stuff you got to do, I guess,
Well,
huh?
we make time.
You make time.
Now, Wesley, this is what we do full time for the last 4 years. This is it, man. Say we are all in this venture, in this passion project. We're all in.
So one last thing I want to ask you about, because I'm interested, is the wine clubs. So how many clubs do you have, and what do you get in the clubs that you guys have available?
We have a very low commitment club. We have two kind of club. One is 6 bottles, and the second one is 12 bottles. Once a year shipment. We are very generous in our discounts. 6 bottle club gets 20% discount on everything they get and everything else they want to buy. And the premium club, which is 12 bottle club, gets 30% discount. It's very close to the wholesale pricing, but we feel like we are trying to build our legacy. Basically, first few hundred people, we're going to keep that. We will grandfather that. We also have a guest house that we give our club members 20% discount off the guest house, and they can book directly with us without.
It's right here on the vineyard, on the property.
I saw it on the website. It's a really cool idea. It's 1.5. I think it says 1.5 miles from just downtown. I mean, what a cool place to be, right?
Yeah.
So our vineyard is literally, once you get here, it feels so far away, but we are gonna be one of the closest vineyard to downtown. We are literally 2 miles from the downtown, and we also, part of the club is the other special bottlings we do, like the pursuit. It is it's optional. It's if club members want to buy that they are more than welcome to buy that. So, but we are keeping it one shipment, generous discount, getting our Copia family to the level where we can continue to make more and more wine.
The key is also the club has gotten first access to all of the wines.
Yes.
So before, it's really like a pre-release, because for example, the wines that we're talking about today, they received them last October. So they get to keep them, collect them, and really have had them for much longer than other folks have tried them. And the Reserve series, the shipment also includes our limited production Cabernet, which we haven't made in every year, but 2019 vintage has actually not been released yet. It will be available in the next club shipment.
And the best part of being part of our club is our pickup party. We do it at our home at the vineyard, and it's always fun.
Yeah, it's always fun. We again, being from the restaurant industry, all things food and culinary intrigue me and are a big part of both of our lives. So we try to pair our wines with different cuisines. So being of Indian heritage, we took on the challenge back in 2019 to do a party where we paired Indian cuisine with our wines. Indian food has a notorious reputation for being a wine killer. And we wanted to show people that that's not necessarily true. Spiced food is not spicy food. The two are very different, and there are ways of pairing that you can work on. And last year we did Spanish tapas, paella, and we also love the live musical entertainment. It's important when you're drinking wine. So for the Indian food pairing, it was a sitar player. And for the tapas, it was live flamenco, singing, dancing, and Spanish guitar. So it's just an amazing time. Some of these members, they mark their calendar the previous year for when the party is. So they make sure that they're going to be in town.
And it's a beautiful time in harvest. It's usually first week of October.
So one last question I want to ask you guys is, I have seen people rave about your wines, just regular people, not ratings or anything like that. So I've heard people say great things about your wines and great things about you two as well, just how nice you guys are and approachable and how great it is to be able to talk to you guys at the winery and all that stuff. So that's really cool. But what are some new things, if there's anything coming up for you guys at Copia, anything that people might want to know about?
Well, I think he kind of teased it a little bit earlier, but we are never limited by what we've done in the previous vintage for what is coming in the next. So some things that people can look forward to in the next couple of years are a Tempranillo driven blend, which is new for us. And then some interesting Bordeaux blends too, varietals that we started working with that are maybe newer and people don't know about are Merlot, for example, a couple of different sites for Cabernet. And then the biggest thing on the horizon is that winery and tasting room building that we are so diligently working toward, that will be right in the center of the vineyard. And we cannot wait. We really cannot wait to have people come and take advantage of this gorgeous space that's being designed by a wonderful architect, Brian Cordy, who's worked on a couple of other amazing projects here in Paso and elsewhere. The idea for us is to offer really immersive tastings and tastings that include not your basic tour, not your basic sort of token barrel tasting and walk around the winery, but something that's immersive, something that includes cuisine, that includes music, that includes just an hour and a half vacation from life. So these are things that we're already thinking about. These are things that we're already working on. We will introduce a couple of different tastings at our downtown lounge in the next year, and we're excited to have people try that.
Well, I just appreciate you guys spending this time with me tonight. I can only imagine how busy you guys are with everything that you have to do over there at the winery, making the wine and taking care of the customers and all that stuff. So I really appreciate your time tonight and talking about your wines. I look forward to going down to Paso Robles and tasting with you guys and just experiencing everything that Copia has to offer. So, and I just wish you guys nothing but luck and good things in the future.
Wesley, thank you so very much for having us on your podcast. And we're looking forward to meet you in person and share some wines. And thank you so very much.
Thanks, Wesley.
This has to be one of my favorite interviews that I've done for this show. Varinder and Anita, they're so nice, and you can really tell that they're striving to offer the absolute best experience they can for their customers. I strongly encourage you to go to their website at www.copiavineyards.com, and that's spelled Copia, and buy some of these award-winning wines for yourself. If you join their wine club, you can also take advantage of this really cool Pursuit series that they do. The Pursuit series offers 3 limited edition single vineyard Syrahs, each expressing the distinct characteristics of the vineyard that the grapes were grown. Finally, I encourage you to visit the show website at www.obsessedwithwine.net. There you'll be able to find past episodes of the show, read tasting notes from these wines recommended by the guests, and to sign up for the mailing list so you can take advantage of bonus episodes that I'll be releasing in the near future. I would also love for you to join the Obsessed with Wine podcast discussion group on Facebook. There you can interact with me and other fans of the show. You can also join the Obsessed with Wine community on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you, and I will see you next week. Cheers!